This session, just put your seatbelt on right now. Go ahead. We'll give you a second. All right. All right. And then we're going to start with this. This is, you know what? Let's just start the show first. What do you say, Mike?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Let's just start this. We got to do it. Yes! Oh, my.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Wait, have I been saying that like every session now? Oh, my goodness gracious. I think so. Anyway, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. You made it back to another session. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for the likes of E+, AAPD, Forbes, J&J, Dun & Bradstreet, all kinds of big companies. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop with podcast producers, engineers, and other specialists and longtime friends. That's who I have here today, Mr. Michael Helms, Michael the Sound Guy. Anyway, I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and that's actually where I met Mike Helms. Way back in the day, early 90s. And, I thought I faded my music. It's still going. All right. But, of course, in post, I'm using different music, so now I have to... All right! God! All right, sorry about that. You know, sometimes I don't know why the iPad was malfunctioning, right? It's got to be the iPad's fault, Mike, right? It's not my fault.
Absolutely.
It's not my fault. All right, anyway, I was in the music business, and since I entered podcasting about 6 years ago, I noticed a huge lack of audio skills in podcasting, and that's where this show can help, because we really talk about the hardcore audio production aspects of podcasting. And if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. Of course, Barry is here with me. Barry, are you psyched that Mike Helms is here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, this is crazy. Yeah. And by the way, Podcast Engineering School starts September 18th. So if you're thinking about, learning how to produce podcasts at a professional level, I teach the Podcast Engineering School. It's an awesome program. Everyone who's gone through it literally loves it and raves about it. And anyway, it's there at podcastengineeringschool.com. All right, now we're ready. And now we're going to start with this. Oh, wait, let me tell you what it is first. This is, wait, should I introduce you first, Mike?
Oh, just roll the tape.
All right. All right, I'm going to roll it. This is back when I actually lived with Michael Helms and a couple other guys, Bryant Jackson and Matt Tuffley, in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, New York. And this was we had a phone number, and because that's back before cell phones, and it was like 94. And Mike Helms, and we used to jam in our place, by the way. So the guitar you hear in the background is us jamming, and this is Mike Helms recording our answering machine message.
Can I have your attention, please? Can I have your attention, please? What we have... Excuse me. Thank you. The fellows are in a groove right now, and they're unable to come to the phone, so I'm going to have to ask everyone to step behind the ropes, please, behind them. And if you have backstage passes, I want to see them. And yes, you, miss, and your friend there, yes, in the red, go ahead and come on through.
All right, well, let's welcome Michael Helms. Michael Helms. I'm going to introduce you in a second, but I just had to play the crowd cheers, and they love you, brother.
Thanks, man.
They love you. Hey, the people still mowing the lawn at your house?
I think they've stopped for the moment.
Yeah, before the show, we're like, they're mowing the lawn, so, might hear some sounds. Anyway, Mike Helms, I've been talking to you about coming on this show for literally a couple years.
I think so, yeah.
Happy to have you here. I'm going to tell you. So, Mike Helms, his website is Michael the Sound Guy, and that's like his industry name, if you want to consider it that. Michael the Sound Guy. He's been in audio and video for over 25 years, probably more like 30 years or even more, dude, actually. Anyway,
possibly, yes.
I met him in New York City, and we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask him about all this stuff, but you were doing some music engineering in New York, and then you did some voiceover work, and now you're doing a lot of location sound work. And you're a graduate of Appalachian State University, and also went to Full Sail, so that's awesome, down there in Florida. And you're the host of the Location Sound podcast. Yes, you've released, I think, 6 episodes, and you've been doing it every week, which is awesome. So if you're listening to this, seriously, go find the Location Sound podcast, and it's Mike interviewing all these guys who literally what they do for a living is go record sound on location. And so, even if you don't record on location, a lot of what they're talking about is really applicable to so many other areas of audio production. Now you're a TV producer in Florida, and also a freelance location sound recordist. So I know you're taking some side gigs, doing some on-site recording of sound, and I know you got your Sound Devices Mix Pre 10T, which we're going to talk about. That's right, 10T. Yeah. And your website, michaelthesoundguy.com. Go check it out. I was there today. I got a picture, but I need a picture for the for the post later tonight, Mike.
All right,
you got a good picture. So anyway, dude. So you're in Florida, and they just got done mowing your lawn. But you know how we start this, right?
That's right.
You know, right? Okay. And by the way, before we really get into it, I want to just remind you that, and I was supposed to tell you this earlier, Mike, but one of the new segments of this show, it's called Nightmare Session. So I'm going to ask you to tell us about a podcast recording session that you did recently that was pretty much a nightmare. And I think between Zencaster and Squadcast and all that, I think you probably have a story for us, right?
I think I have a few, yeah.
All right. And then at the very end and I'll probably forget. See, that's the problem about saying stuff at the front that, I'm going to do this. And then we record the whole episode, and it's like, I never asked them those 3 questions that I told everybody I was going to ask them. Anyway, I'll try to remember. I guess that's my job as the host. So the speed round, bro. I know you've been recording a lot of episodes for your Location Sound podcast, so you just speed round overview, what equipment you're using, what microphone, the signal flow, where you're recording it, where you're editing it, and all that stuff. Give us the overview, brother.
All right, so I'm currently recording on the Electro Voice RE20 microphone, and then I have that plugged into the Sound Devices Mix Pre 10T. And then I'm using that as an audio interface, and that's going into my computer. I have a MacBook Pro here, and I actually record it to the MixPre 10T, and then I take that, and then I'll bring it into Audition, and I edit in Audition all my podcasts. What did I leave out? And
then and thank you for respecting the 60-second rule for the speed round. Not everyone does. All right, so that's pretty simple. Then obviously you mix it out of, or you can even in Audition you can basically mix it down and spit out an MP3, correct?
Exactly. And actually, what I have been doing is I will export my final into a WAV file, and then I do my match loudness setting, so I get my minus 16 LUFS. And then I export that as an MP3. Yeah,
that's an awesome feature in Adobe Audition. Excuse me. Wow. Adobe Audition, the match loudness feature. Barry, what do you think of my voice today?
There's no activity, no giggle, no nothing.
Sometimes Barry's harsh, man.
He is.
You know what I'm saying? You never met Barry because you weren't up in New Jersey when I was hanging out with Barry.
No.
All right, so you got the RE20, and I know you were using 1 or 2 mics before that. What other mics do you have?
I had a Sterling Audio. It was like an ST51, and that was back in the day when I started. It's one of those things where your spouse is going, "How much do you need to spend on a microphone?" and it really, I want to say, I think I got it at Guitar Center. I think it was like $50 or something. And then I think I bought a Zoom H5. And I was just getting started, and she didn't want me to spend a bunch of money. And so I'm like, I need something to be able to record interviews and to be able to do all this stuff. And so that's what I went with.
Right. And so a Zoom H5. So, well, you were, for your new podcast, Location Sound Podcast, you're doing all your interviews are over the internet so far, correct?
I did one, let's see, I've done one or two in person, but yeah, most of them I'm using Squadcast.
Squadcast, which is actually what we're on right now. And I was telling you before, I did 2 sessions on Zencastr today, and it was acting a little funky. So, but I like Zencastr a lot, and I'm liking Squadcast more and more. They've been fixing it up little by little, which is awesome. So, all right. So now you got the RE20, and what is that? You got like a big piece of foam, like a windscreen that you slip over the top of the RE20, right?
Yeah, I just I went online, and I forget where I got it from, but I wanted something because I had the traditional kind of the gooseneck pop filter that you slide around, but it was all over the place, and you'd bump it and move it, and so I just wanted something. I want to slip this over, and then I can get up close. I don't have to worry about adjusting it all the time because I was really fighting it.
Right. I think I looked at probably the same windscreen when I was looking for one for my RE20, but it's huge, right? When you put that thing on, it's like this big, huge thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a giant foam, nice little foam cover.
Yeah, and the Rode Broadcaster also has a similar one, although it's not quite as big. But the Rode Broadcaster has this big piece of foam you put on that mic too, which is cool. And then you got the MixPre 10. You've made friends with some people at Sound Devices, haven't you?
I have actually. When I was out at Podcast Movement last year, when we were out there working at the podcast engineering school booth.
Yes,
we were doing the microphone test, but I walked over and saw the Sound Devices guys, and they had the MixPre 6, which was just out. And I talked to the guys, and I ended up testing it, and I really liked it. But I wanted something that had time code, because when you're out in the field, you really need a time code source, because you want to have the camera and the mixer to have matching time code. And that's what I needed. So I ended up getting that. It has 8 XLR inputs, then it has like a 3.5 millimeter jack inputs, and I can record up to 12 channels. So it's everything that I need right there.
Right, the MixPre 10T, and that's something that's for podcasting, definitely overkill. Like even a MixPre 6 is really good. I shouldn't say overkill, but most people are not going to need a 10T for podcasting. So MixPre 6 is usually good enough because there's 4 XLR inputs, so you can plug in 4 mics, and then it also has 2 other inputs to total 6. So that's usually good enough. But the 10T is good for you because when you're on location, right?
Exactly. And so, you usually have one boom mic, that you're holding over the talent's head. And that kind of gives, that's a nice, you pick up a little room sound, but it makes it a nice, natural sounding. And then you usually have like 2 lavalier microphones, little wireless mics that you put on the talent as well. And so you've got lots of options there. But the idea is you want to have a boom mic and you want to have a lavalier mic, and then you can mix the two. Because sometimes people move off axis when they're acting or, moving around. And so between the wireless mic and the boom mic, you got it covered.
Wow. And so sometimes you actually mix them together, and wouldn't there potentially be some phasing issues?
Sometimes it's actually pretty interesting because they're, depending on the quality of your microphone, people use a Sanken COS 11. It's a really popular lavalier mic, and between that and, a good boom mic, sometimes, you can EQ it in post because it's all about post-production. You get in there, and a lot of times you're moving in and out between the lav mic and the boom mic, depending on what's happening. Because, they, like I said, they turn their head or they go off axis. You can tweak it in post.
Right. So, all right. So, yeah, you use a lot of lavaliers when you're shooting like commercials and video and stuff. So what are the lavs that you use? They're probably pretty expensive and sort of like out of the budget of most podcasters. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can get some decent mics, but in the field when it comes to location sound recording, there are some like top name brand mics that are kind of the industry standards. You have Lectrosonics, you have Wizzycom, there is Audio Limited. There's quite a few out there. And then a lot of people, though, use like the Sennheiser G3 was real popular, and now they have the G4. Those are wireless mics, and those are a little more affordable. But yeah, when you buy, two wireless mics from Lectrosonics, and then get a stereo receiver for those two mics, you end up, it's probably putting you close to around $5,000.
Oof. Yeah, but that's serious quality, right?
Exactly, and those are good. They're metal bodied. But they're workhorses. They're not going to get broken, really.
Right. So, all right. So then you're recording in your MacBook Pro using Squadcast, and now your MacBook Pro, is that relatively new, or is that a beast?
It's an older one, and it works really good. So far, I haven't had any issues. Probably about getting close to need to upgrade. But what's happening now is, like I popped the card out of the mixer, a little SD card, and put it in. It has an SD card slot in the side. But some of these new MacBooks are now, there's no USBs, there's no SD card slots, because they're trying to move wireless it's getting crazy.
Oh, that's terrible. I actually recently heard that on the iPhone, was this what I heard? Someone said that the iPhone, because on the iPhone, remember they got rid of all like the headphone jack.
Yes.
Or something, whatever. But someone said they're coming back. Someone said that Apple's going to bring back the headphone jack. And I was like, I don't know if that's true, but like, I mean, come on. You can't plug in headphones to your phone? I mean, that, right?
Well, you can, but it's an adapter now. So, the same port, the same lightning bolt, port that you plug in to charge it is now where you plug in this adapter that has a headphone jack. So I don't think you can charge it and, use headphones at the same time. I don't think.
Yeah, and it's like you said though, I think they're focused on, well, they're not focused on audio production. Let's put it that way. These Mac computers a little bit, but like iPhones and all that, they're not really worried about professional sound, right? They just want people to open up their phone and take pictures and video and whatever, just use the onboard mic and stuff. So that's one of the things that's hard to navigate sometimes, like with phones and with mobile devices, is like audio, because again, they're not made for professional audio. I mean, you can do some pretty good things with them, right, if you have the right stuff, and it's not impossible to get good audio, but they're really, in a way, they're really not built for that, and it's not easy.
No, it's true. And I'm an Apple person. I love Apple products. I mean, I've got the iPad, I've got the iPhone, I've got a MacBook Pro. So I like, and even my family is all into it. So we like everything. Everything communicates real well. So, on a prosumer level, everything works pretty good. Yeah, but from on the high end pro end stuff, it's not the greatest. So,
okay. Well, I'm going to ask, I want to just go back in time to when you first came to New York. But before we get there, let's just keep going with your production workflow. And so then you're doing your post-production in Audition. What kind of effects and plugins and how much are you really processing in Audition?
I have a basic workflow that I do. I always, I bring in my audio on one channel. I bring in my guest audio, of course, on a second channel. And I always put, a compressor on each channel. And I usually have like a set EQ thing that I drop in. And so I roll off some of those low ends, like 80 hertz and below. Sometimes I'll even bump it up a little bit higher, depending on if it's too boomy. So I usually do that first. And when it comes to like my final mix bus out, I always put like a multi-channel compressor on there, and I usually put a limiter as well. So, and that's just it's just a light limiter, and it comes from my broadcast days too, because when you're doing TV commercials and things like that, you're trying to control the audio, and if you watch when we get footage and commercials that come out of New York and stuff, those things are slamming if you watch the meters. But they never go past, a certain level. So when I kind of mix my podcast kind of like that. I don't slam it, but I always, mix it so it's strong and then put a little limiter on there so we never clip.
Right. So what do you just like you use the Adobe Audition plugins and stuff for that?
Yes, I don't have any, any third-party plugins at this time, so I just kind of use what's on board.
Yeah, which is supposed to be really good. Everyone always says how Adobe Audition's effects and stuff are really good.
Yeah, and actually, after hearing you talk about the Isotope RX6, I want that. I got the demo, and I really liked it, so that would be the next purchase.
There you go. Well, you're in a weird position because when people sign up to take podcast engineering school, they get half off of the Isotope stuff. But see, you already know you and I are on par, so there's no need for you to come through my school. So I don't know. Maybe there's a way I can get you half off.
Hey,
but I don't want to abuse it.
That is true. We don't abuse things.
Yeah, we don't abuse things. And by the way, I just want to say that back in New York when we lived together and we were working in studios together and all that, we were good gentlemen. We didn't get in any trouble. We didn't do any illegal things that anyone can prove. So you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Did I sell it well? No. Okay. Oh, no. It's funny. I've never had a guest on this show that I know so well that like sometimes when I think of things I want to say, like then I immediately think, oh, you can't say that. So
we were young, we were single, life was crazy.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about that. When did you arrive in New York?
I think I was there. I got there in November, was it 90, 92, 93, something like that? And,
probably 92, because I got there in early 93.
Okay.
And you were there.
That was a weird thing because I had graduated from Full Sail and I was doing an internship at the Post Group at the Disney MGM Studios. And it was a big post-production facility. And I ended up, my dad actually was traveling, had a business trip, and he said, why don't you come with me to New York? So I was like, well, if I go up there, I should at least try to find, have some interviews. So Full Sail's placement department actually hooked me up. I had like 6 interviews, and the one that I chose was a paid internship at Soundtrack Studios in New York. And I came home, I packed, I sold my car, and I flew up to New York with 2 suitcases. One of my dad's buddies picked me up, drove me around the city for the day, just showed me some points of interest, and then dropped me off at the YMCA.
Oh,
and I was like, and I lived in the YMCA for 2 weeks while I was working at the studio, and then I was looking for an apartment at the same time. So it was a big change for a little Florida boy.
Right. So you're working at Soundtrack, and then you ended up getting your own place, and then in '93 is when I met you. And you were at Soundtrack for a little while, but then you made a move. So just why don't you, just for the listeners, why don't you just describe the what was going on at Soundtrack at the time and like the kind of sessions we were working on and all that?
Well, Soundtrack at the time was a big hip hop studio, and hip hop sessions went from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. But then during the day, from like 9 to 5 during the day, there were all these advertising clients. So we were at the front desk as interns, and we were answering the phones and ordering food and cleaning up after sessions. It was not a glamorous kind of life. So it was crazy. But then as time goes by, they stick you in on a session. Sometimes you do your full shift as an intern, and then all of a sudden they stick you on a session at midnight, and you're there until 6 a.m. So it was kind of a crazy life, but we were all in it. We saw people come and go. I worked with this one guy one time. He showed up, and it was after a session. We had to clean up after this hip hop session, and he was like, "You have to take out the trash." I was like, "Oh man, I mean, we got to clean up. We just got to get in there, and it's no big deal. I know it's not the most clean." He said, "I don't know, man. I don't know if this is for me." And I was like, hey, don't feel like you have to stay. If you don't want to do this, there's other people that do. So,
right.
And he said, you don't mind if I leave? And I was like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
so, but some people don't, they just don't mind, or, they can't handle it, or they don't want to pay the dues. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I remember being in that position, and it's like, yeah, you're taking out the garbage, you're cleaning up, and then like, I would always like try ask the engineers and the assistant engineers questions like, hey, what are you doing over there? What's that piece of equipment and everything? So like at the same time you're taking out garbage and doing all that stuff, like I was always, and I know you did too. Like we were always so interested to learn more. So and usually the people we worked with were happy to teach us some stuff too.
Yeah, there were some good guys, and they saw that we were getting started, and they would they'd show us some little tips here and there, and just show us what they would show us what we what we could do in the future, and it's just I think that's the kind of thing you need to have a little bit of that, some mentors, and kind of giving some tips and tricks. So it was awesome.
Yeah, and so those rap sessions we worked on were crazy stuff. Like there's a million stories we could tell. Probably not the super appropriate for this podcast. But anyway, there came a time when you sort of, wanted to move on, right? And work on some different stuff.
Yeah, I was kind of getting burned out from doing the hip hop sessions. I mean, they were fun. Sometimes you work with some great groups. They were very nice. It was really cool. And other times you work with some groups that they were not nice. There was, I remember one night there was a guy turned around and he had a gun. And it was like, whoa, you can't have that in here. He goes, oh, man, it's not loaded. It's not loaded. And then later, when we were cleaning up, we found a bullet on the floor. It's like, hello. So, I mean, it was crazy. So stuff like that. But what I started to do, I wanted to shift over to the advertising side. So I would work sessions all night, and then I'd stay in the morning and set up for all these advertising clients. And I really was enjoying that. I mean, they're putting together, TV commercials. They're bringing in voiceover talent. They're recording that, and they're editing it, and then getting music and sound effects. And it was a lot of fun. So I wanted to do more of that. But the company, I was like, hey, I'd like to be the post-production assistant. And they were like, well, we don't really have that position, and it's not really being, and you're not really defining it. I'm like, oh, great. So this is a perfect. It's a perfect example of engineers and, networking and things. But one of the engineers that work there called me one day and said, hey, I heard you were looking for a job. And I was like, how did you know that I was thinking about that? But he says, hey, I got this new studio over here. Would you be interested in coming over? So I went over and interviewed, and I ended up moving to that other studio. And they did more promo work. They were like advertising. They worked with, the Sci-Fi Channel and HBO and, Cartoon Network. So we were always working with voiceover people and sound effects and all that kind of stuff. So that was, to me, and it was Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So it was a little more fun. You could have a life, because I was sleeping all day and working all night. And when I switched over there, I could enjoy, New York City. And so I really made a good decision there.
Yeah, you really did enjoy that. I remember when you moved over there, and then you really liked it, and you were really enjoying the work in terms of like these like voiceover guys coming in, and some famous voiceover guys come in, and they would just do like some of the sessions would be really short, right? Because all they got to do is read like 2 or 3 lines or something, right?
Yeah, they would be in and out like 2 minutes. I mean, they would come in, they'd read the script once or twice, and it was perfect. We just did it twice just for a backup, just as a safety.
Right.
And they were like, all right, because every now and then you'd say, could we read that one more time just as a safety? And they'd go, why?
Why?
It was just perfect. But yeah, we had some cool guys come in. I got to be good friends with some of these. They were, some of them were like 1970s like actors and TV shows like Hawaii Five-0, the original, and The $6 Million Man, and just shows like that. A Black Sheep Squadron with Robert Conrad. So it was fun working with these guys that had kind of stepped away from the camera, but were still actively doing voice work and things like that. So it was fun.
And now, in terms of obviously you coming from basically a rap studio and then going to a smaller voiceover studio, what were the differences in the equipment and the technology and the production workflow and stuff like that?
They were still, when we were in New York, it was kind of like the dawn of digital. So we were still recording analog on a lot of things, but we were also starting to record digital. So they had, let's see, we would record to DAT sometimes, but we were still recording on like 1/4-inch tape, reel to reel. Wow. So we would, set up a session real quick, print, 1K, 10K, and 100 hertz, and, slate it and start recording these guys, and then done. And then you're cutting the tape and rolling it off and running it up to the front desk, and they're putting a label on it, and a bike messenger grabs it and takes it off to like Broadway Video or some place where they're using it, in a show right now. So it was pretty crazy.
Wow, that is crazy. All right, so yeah, you're right. That was the time, I left New York City in early '96, and that was about the time that Pro Tools rigs started to exist, and they started wheeling in a Pro Tools rig to a room with a 72 channel SSL console, and so that's when digital was becoming more serious. Of course, digital had been around for years before that, but it was really becoming a thing, and I'm always grateful and thankful that I got into audio when tape was still around, right? And then so that we learned from that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, at first we all just wanted to go digital, but then when I went to this studio, my boss, Bob Liebert of Liebert Recording Studios, he actually was a voice talent as well, but he also was an engineer, studio engineer, and he was, I don't know if you remember back in the day, it was one of those Ronco products where it slices, it dices. How much would you pay? Kind of a thing. And he was that voice. He was the Ronco knife guy.
Interesting.
And, but he made us record 2 1/4-inch tape and then edit it. So he would pick a music cut from the sound library and we'd record it to tape, and then he'd say, okay, cut this to a 30. Cut this to a 15, make this a 10. Because it couldn't just fade out. Like a lot of stuff today, people just fade it out right at the end. There's no end to the song.
Right.
But he wanted you to take the end of the song and edit it so it fits, so it's a 30, but it has a finish, which
right.
is, you don't see that so much anymore. But I appreciate him, even though sometimes we didn't like doing it, it was fun.
All right, so then you ended up leaving New York right around the same time I did, and it's so funny because me, you, and Bryant and Matt, we all lived together. And literally, I think we all left New York almost at the same exact time. And I don't think we planned it that way. It just sort of happened. So then you went back to Florida, right?
Yeah, I'd had a long-standing relationship with a young lady from Brazil, and it was one of those things where I'd finally decided, is this somebody I want to, make a future with? And so we actually had planned to get married, and because we had been dating on again, off again for like 9 years. So I was like, you know what? This is a good transition time. I moved back to Florida. I had a friend that had a video production company, and he was working in conjunction with an ad agency, and they needed a studio. So I actually moved back to Florida. I started a recording studio. I bought a Pro Tools system. It was a used Pro Tools system at the time. And I started working with this ad agency, video production company, and it was me. So I was doing voiceover work. We were doing music recording on the side, and it was a little crazy, but it was like I just jumped in head first.
Wow. All right. So then, yeah, and then in Florida. So then, after that, you how did you make the decision to get into location sound?
Well, I went through a few transitions. It was because I was a new business owner. I probably was a little naive, and the companies I was working with kind of, they kept asking me to lower my rates because they were giving me all this business, and I kept lowering my rates, and suddenly they were making. I heard one time like, "Oh, we had the best quarter ever," and I was like, "We're working on the same projects, and I didn't have the best quarter ever because they keep lowering my rates are low." And they were like, "Well, you kind of have a bad attitude," and so anyway, we had a little falling out. So I basically just moved my studio out, and I kind of had it was a bad experience. So I kind of left that side. I sold the studio, sold the equipment, and just kind of started. I was a little aimless for a while. I worked for an audio-visual company for a while. We did lots of live shows and events, and still doing, audio, but it was, different form. And then it all came back around where I was doing some video editing on the side, and a local cable company, actually at the time it was Time Warner Cable. I ended up getting hired by Time Warner Cable as a producer because I had video background, because I have audio background, and they kind of married that together. But we were outsourcing everything, so I didn't have to do. I was meeting with clients and writing scripts, and then I would hire these production companies, and I would just go out, I'd direct, and then they would shoot it and edit it, And then, so it was an interesting time. And then later on, we brought all that production in-house. So I was back hands-on again. So I was, writing, shooting, editing. And so it just kind of transitioned. And that's why I always recommend to people, learn multiple skills. I mean, I know if you like audio, that's great. But learn some of these other tools too, because you never know what situation you're going to be in, and you might need that.
Right. Yeah, and these days, that one of those things might be streaming.
Exactly. I mean, you still need to have those skills to make sure you're not, the picture looks good. Make sure your audio sounds good. You're not clipping.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's so, I really like the fact that over your career, you've learned different facets of audio and video, and now you just put it all together. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you're working on videos, you know how to make audio sound correct, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like when you work with video people, they have to handle audio usually, because there's usually not, a set audio engineer for some of these commercials. Sometimes there is, depending on the budget. But video people, video editors, usually they just throw the audio in, and usually it works out okay. But one of my jobs is I've really been, taking the time to try to educate some of these video editors and kind of almost walking through what we had just talked about, how put a compressor on every voice, because we're out in the field and we got a couple mics going, we've got actors. And so when they bring that in the studio, you teach them how to, let's make sure they sound as good as possible. So I take them under my wing usually and try to help them, show them some audio tips just to make the commercial sound better.
Right? Yeah. So important. Audio is so important. So, all right. So now what are, you were saying how some video people, if they don't know audio real well, what are some of the mistakes that they might make with regards to audio?
Well, when you have two wireless mics going, when one person's, usually they're not talking at the same time. So when one person's talking, you want to, either, I always bring the volume down on the other mic, because especially if they're close, we talked about before having some phasing issues. Sometimes that's a challenge. So you kind of just fade that other mic out completely while they're not talking. And then right before they start to speak, you bring that back up and then you dip the other microphone. So it just makes it a nice, cleaner track. Because over time, if you have all these mics open at the same time, you're going to start having, phasing issues, as well as it adds noise to the whole production.
Right. And just to be clear, the scenario you're talking about there, you actually, because things are scripted, when people are going to talk and when they're going to be silent, right?
Most of the time, yes.
Most of the time. Yeah, because I was just thinking, if in a podcasting scenario, if I'm not talking on a podcast, you wouldn't want to bring down my volume because I might jump in at any moment. You don't know when I'm going to jump in with my opinion, right?
Right, and that's the magic of the editing, because even when I edit podcasts, I'm bringing everybody's mic down while they're not talking, and as we can see it, but on a live situation, that's really hard to do.
Yeah, it's hard to do, and I'm surprised. I'm kind of surprised that you actually do that. I mean, could you just do it in post instead of riding the faders while you're recording?
Well, actually, while we're recording, I usually don't do it like that. So you just record.
I see.
Since everybody's getting a separate track, you just let it run. And because when you're on set, it's kind of interesting. There is really, when you're doing location sound stuff, there's no EQ going on. So you are recording it just, kind of a dry signal, a good quality level without clipping. And then it's always in post when you start to EQ and you balance it out with the others. So
got it. And so when you're recording a bunch of these microphones, well, I guess, so if you're recording, like for instance, with your MixPre 10T, and I do want to find out what's in your bag, because isn't that the first question you ask on your show?
Yeah. What's in your audio bag?
Yeah, so when you're recording onto one recorder usually. So all the audio is synced up with itself. Like you don't have to sync up or line up any audio, but you do have to line up the audio to the video later. And is that, I don't know how to do that. Do you just have to do that manually, or is there some trick to it?
You can do it manually, but there are so many great tools out there where you don't have to. So, for example, with the MixPre 10T, it has timecode built in. So its timecode is embedded in the file. And then I have a little device. There's a lot of sync boxes out there, but they're little time code sync boxes. And what you do is you can actually take a feed, a time code signal out of your mixer, and they call it, jam syncing it, and you jam sync it with this time code box. So now the two time codes match. And they're supposed to say, they stay locked basically. And so you put that on the camera and then feed that into the camera. So the camera has a time code that matches the time code in the mixer. Wow. And then when you're in post, there's software that will actually sync those two time codes up and they match up perfect. Now there's another software out there, it's called Pluralize, and a lot of people will use that. And it actually analyzes the waveforms. So the camera has just a reference track. Most cameras have a little mic on it. And so it's recording audio, but it's not the greatest audio. And then you have your audio kit that's recording nice, high-quality wave audio. And then when you put them together in the Pluralize program, it actually analyzes the waveforms and lines them up together.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, time code. Yeah, I remember that. And you got one of those little things from the Sound Devices guys at NAB.
Actually, I went to the Tentacle Sync booth. And I had bought one Tentacle Sync box, and then they discontinued that one, and they went to the Bluetooth one. And I have an older one, and they still had one analog one that I was able to get. But yeah, it's pretty cool, and you can sync up multiple ones. Like you could have 10 separate cameras, and none of them are recording audio, and you have one mixer recorder that's recording the audio. But because they all have the matching time code, because you can sync them all together, and then you can sync all your footage and audio perfectly. That's
cool. Like my mind is already starting to think about like how you could use that for podcasting, because this I'm sure you would do it in a different way, but like Zencaster and Squadcast and Ringer, like sometimes there is some audio drift, and the audio tracks can like get out of sync with each other. But so if they were to do something like that with some sort of time code, then that would really help that. But that would require some thinking and some engineering and a lot of money to create that, which is what I would love to do. All these guys that I just mentioned, like Ringer has its own app, but on a computer, they all basically piggyback on Chrome and some Firefox. So they're not their own program. So I would love to create my own program that does the syncing in a really good way, and also doesn't have dropouts and clipping and all that stuff. Clicking. All right, let's talk about what's in your bag, dude.
So I have the MixPre 10T as my mixer and a mixer recorder, and I have that in a Orca bag, and it's basically a location sound bag. And then I have a harness. It's an Orca harness that you clip the bag onto, so you can wear it, right around your chest, because you want to be able to look down and you can make, trim, preamp adjustments on the fly, as well as, you're monitoring all the levels. So what happens usually in a mix situation, say for a location type situation, you have ISO channels. So each mic is on its own separate channel, but then you have a left and right channel. And that's what you're usually sending to the camera. And it's a mix of all those other mics that are being used at that time. So you just send, and it's really a reference channel to the to the camera. And then that way they've got, if they want to play back a clip, they have audio that matches. And so you just send them like a mix of everything. And then in post, you have the other file that actually has all the separate ISO channels that they can break out.
Yeah, that's cool. So, and this is why, we're talking about on location stuff and cameras and, syncing audio with video, and it's just really good knowledge to have. And so if you're into any of this kind of thing, definitely go check out Mike's podcast, Location Sound Podcast. So producing your podcast these days, you're doing all your interviews over the internet, and but not specifically for your show, but have you? Let's get into the nightmare session portion of this show. Have you tell us about a session that really went bad, if you can think of one?
Well, we were one of my first times I used Squadcast. Every time we would start the session, I could see my guest, but he would just freeze, and the whole session would freeze. And it's like we couldn't. We were trying to have a conversation, and I'd get 5 seconds when we connect, and then it would lock up. And we restarted, and we rebooted, and we did all that on both sides. And we're texting back and forth, and then we finally call on the phone. And what we ended up having to do was I listened to him on the phone. He recorded his side. I recorded my side. We did the double ender. And then he sent me his file, and I matched it up later in the edit. And that happens sometimes. And it's like, the nice part is I'm interviewing audio guys. And so all of them have a mixer recorder and good mics that they can, set up, and we can get a good backup. And a lot of times I end up using their audio backup as, their main audio track in the interview.
Yeah, which is the best because, right, it's their local clean copy.
It's perfect. Unless they're in a room with, tile floors, high ceilings. That's always a challenge too. When we're on set, we have that a lot too. And if you can't see the floor when we're filming, we throw down like a packing blanket, a sound blanket on the floor. We'll hang up sound blankets just off camera so you don't see them, but they help with the reflections and the echo in the space. And that's one of our biggest challenges when we're on location sometimes.
Right, video is such a different animal. It's like you rarely think about that, but when I've seen like behind the scenes footage, like the making of a movie or something, you see like even like it might be two people sitting on a park bench talking, but like someone's taking like just a still photograph of the set, and like there's like 3 cameras right near them, and they're trying to sit on this park bench and have a normal conversation sort of, and there's like 3 big cameras right next to them. It's like. And so as a viewer, you don't ever think about that, but that's really cool that if you're not seeing the floor in the picture, in the video, then you could put up, put down blankets, and you could put up sound barriers or hang curtains and stuff. What else can you do?
Well, sometimes too, if you have an actress and she's wearing high heel shoes and she's walking and she's talking, well, you're hearing her steps on the floor, on the tile, on the concrete, whatever they're walking on. So sometimes they have these like hush heels, and it's almost like a little pad that you stick on the bottom of their shoes. It's adhesive on one side, and it helps absorb, some of the walking sound. And also, if you don't see their feet, we'll actually have them take their shoes off. So they come walking in, and you don't see that they're barefooted, but it really, it controls the environment. And that's really the biggest thing that we're always trying to do. But the same thing when you're editing a podcast or recording a podcast, some of your guests, they're in a very live space. And so a lot of times I'll ask them, hey, in advance, could you put down, carpet is always good, upholstered furniture, curtains, all those things help absorb the sound.
Right. That's so interesting. And I recently saw a movie. I can't remember what it was, but it was back from the 70s. Oh, it was Jaws. I actually saw Jaws on the Amazon Prime, and I'm like, oh, I haven't seen this literally in 35 years maybe. And so I just was watching it, and it was, it was interesting. It was good. Obviously, it's a classic movie. But like the sound in the movie was, it was okay, but like I think the sound in movies has gotten better. It's definitely gotten better over the years, but like I think the quality these days is usually really high. And would you agree?
I definitely agree. And back then too, they were recording on the Nagra decks, and those were just like a portable 1/4-inch tape deck. And they would plug in, I think it would, depending on the model, I think I could get 3 or 4 inputs into the Nagra, but they had to do a live mix to left and right to a 2-track. So there was no ISO tracks separately, recorded. They did that live. So if you weren't a good mixer back in the day, you could really mess up some audio.
Right. That's true. Nowadays, everybody can be, wearing a body mic and wireless. Yeah. definitely makes a big difference. It really does. Because sometimes in those old movies, you're like, what did he say?
Yeah. Even some modern movies, you're like, what did you say? I missed that totally. And it just, it really depends. Because a lot of times too is like if you're on a noisy set, if there's planes flying over, if there's, cars and traffic, you're near a highway, those all cause problems. And a lot of times right after, we'll go into a quiet space and have the people do the same line over again, something that they could possibly match up in post. They talk about looping and ADR, automatic dialogue replacement. A lot of times they have to come in the studio and they watch the clip and then they try to say their lines again and sync it up. And sometimes it works really good and sometimes it doesn't. But it's more expensive. Especially if you have to bring A-list actors back in the studio to have them redo their lines because the set was noisy. That can, so you want to try to get that on. That's why it's so important to have a good quiet set.
Right. Same thing with podcasting, right? If you're going to be recording yourself or your co-host or guests and stuff, it's like you got to be in a quiet room. Today I recorded 2 episodes with clients where the guest was like, sounded like they were sitting in a cubicle in an office with like a million other cubicles. Like you could just hear people talking in the background. It wasn't that loud, but it was just enough where it's just annoying, right? You don't want that. But anyway, that's the guest, right? The guest on the show, you can't control them and their setup, right? It's difficult.
Yeah, you try to prep them a little bit, but sometimes it's kind of like how you've talked with your guests too. People show up, they want to wear earbuds for the interview, and it's like, that's really the last resort. If that's all you got, that's great. But ideally, for a better, especially when you're doing a show about audio, you want the audio to sound good. And if you can't understand or it sounds bad, it's like, ugh. But you know what? Sometimes if the content is good, you kind of have to just let it go. You gotta, you do what you can when you edit it, but sometimes, it's either you don't do the interview or you get one and it's not 100%,
right,
like you'd like it to be.
Totally. All right. So I know you're a bit of a perfectionist in the editing department. So you spend a lot of time editing your own podcast. So tell us about your editing philosophy and and how you edit podcasts.
Well, I want the first 2 minutes to be great. So, because that's, people are starting to listen. If you have a lot of ums and ahs and little, smacks before words and stuff, I try to take all that stuff out. And, you try to make it sound as natural as possible. People talk about room tone. Room tone is just the sound of the room without anybody talking. And sometimes when you're doing an interview, there's a little pause in between. So you nobody's speaking, so you can take that little piece. And I'll use that so you don't really change, you're not changing the timing up. Because you know how sometimes when you start cutting out ums and ahs, the timing can be off. And you want it to sound like a natural conversation. And I'll use that little room tone to cover up those little idiosyncrasies in their voice and little smacks and things like that. So, but I want that first 2 minutes to sound great so you continue to listen. And if you can take out an and an ah, and make it sound natural, I do it. And sometimes it's okay. It's a part, well, someone's like, yeah, I think that, And so you try to, if it works, sometimes you start editing and you can't get it out to make it sound natural. So you leave it, you got to do what you have to do. So I spend a lot of time making sure I'll take out if there's long gaps and they're thinking about the question. I try to, tighten stuff up. I like a nice, produced podcast.
Right. Yeah. It really makes a big difference. I just recently started listening to, I tried to listen to a couple podcasts that were like fan podcasts about there's a new HBO show called Sharp Objects. And anyway, I was like looking, who's doing a podcast about this show, right? Because that's the thing, right? It's like every show on TV, there's usually a bunch of fan podcasts that talk about it. So I was listening to one, and it was horrendous. Like there were so many ums and so many long pauses. I couldn't listen to it. I literally couldn't listen to it. And I know we've all been there, right? So, and this was like they were working for they were part of like some entertainment magazine. It was like the VP and the whatever. Like they were like in the media sort of, and yet they put out a podcast like that. So I totally get what you're saying about the first couple minutes moving and being clean and not turning people off. So so that means right now in this episode, probably no one's listening because the first 2 minutes was horrendous.
And even this is what we do, and we still do ums and ahs. I mean, they regulate our speech, so people do it and they don't realize they do it. We know because we deal with it all the time. But especially if you're not a professional, it's hard for them not to do that. But yeah, when you start listening back, you're like, oh, you're killing me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming near the end. But you're going to have to come back on the show. I already told you that. I didn't ask you. I told you. And isn't it great when you could treat your guests like that? Because he's a good friend. No, I want you to come back, maybe in a few months or something. And I want to talk deeper about some things. This was a nice overview to get to know you, and so people can hear, some of your wisdom. But so your next purchase, what do you have any plans for your next purchase of audio gear or equipment or software?
And that's another thing. Audio is very expensive when it comes to these mixers. When you see these guys that are wearing a mixer, on their chest, and they've got the mics and stuff. I mean, some of those kits are $15,000-$20,000 worth of gear. Jeez. It's not cheap. And so a lot of people will start, some of the wireless mics, just the mic, like the Sanken Cost 11 mic, it's about $500, and that's just the little mic. And then you have to buy the transmitter and the receiver and all those things. And so that's usually one of your biggest expenses. But the trick is there's a lot of companies out there that rent gear. So if you have a movie or an independent film or even just an interview for a day, you can actually rent a mixer recorder, and you usually it's all divided up where you have the fee that you charge for your services, and then you have a kit rental fee on top of that. So you can cover even if you rented everything, you still get paid with the fee that you charge for your services. So usually it's a double, there's a charge there. And if you own the gear, you can still charge a rental fee because you've invested that money in the gear as well. So that's another way around it. So you don't have to, don't go into, everybody says, a lot of my guests don't go into debt buying a bunch of gear. Rent it first. And over time, if you find that this is something you use all the time, then go ahead and buy it.
So for you, what's next?
That's a good question. I'd like some other wireless microphones, and there's some out there. Some of my guests have talked about, like Wizicom is a microphone manufacturer, a wireless microphone, and they're out of Italy, and I hear their mics are really fantastic. Electrosonics has new mics. They've got waterproof mics. One of my guests actually used to work on, he did audio for Discovery Channel's Naked and Afraid. His name is Jimmy Saiska, and he talks about, they were in the water, the mud, in the jungle, recording these guys. And I don't know if you noticed in the episode, we talk about the necklaces that those people wear. They're actually, a microphone is hidden in the necklace, and then they wear these little kind of canvas bags on the side, and that's where the packs are. So the wireless transmitters are in the. So you got the transmitter, and then they've got the receiver, on the audio kit.
All right.
So it's really kind of an interesting story, and sometimes they're using a boom mic over their heads, and sometimes they're not. They're running around with these wireless mics. So it is pretty interesting. But once again, you can't have a cheap mic, or it's not going to make it. Plastic body, is going to get broken. The antennas get snapped off. So you want something that's going to be robust and hold up. So I think a nice a newer wireless mic set would probably be one of my next purchases.
Nice. And I just thought of it, so I got to ask you, a lot of voiceovers use the Sennheiser MKH 416 shotgun microphone. And I know when you're, doing the boom, when you're booming out a microphone, when you're shooting video and you're recording the audio, you do use a shotgun mic, right? And sort of hold it above their head and point it at them, right?
Yes. And actually the Sennheiser 416 is like an industry, standard, industry workhorse, because they're great. They work well when it's humid outside. They're just really good mics. So a lot of people like those. Some of the other microphones, the more sensitive ones, they actually, if it's humid, the mic starts crackling. So it's a great mic when the conditions are good, but sometimes if it's raining or something like that, you have to switch to a different mic.
Interesting. So that 416 is really a beast.
Yes, and they're about $1,000, right?
$1,000.
And I heard, I went to a location sound workshop up in Atlanta called at True Audio, and they were saying that the Rode NTG3 is very similar to the 416. It actually has a little more low end to it, but I guess when the patents ran out with Sennheiser, Rode jumped on, and the NTG3 is a couple $100 cheaper, and that's an alternative that a lot of people are using as well.
Mm. And do you have you worked at all with trying to do location sound and get the sound, instead of recording on a mix pre 10T type of thing, have one or two mics coming into like, a mobile phone or like an iPad or something? Have you done any of that?
Not really. Once in a while, not with an iPad or an iPhone.
Right.
You know what? There's cases where people, if that's all they have and they can plug a mic directly into a phone, you can still get some decent audio if that's, if you're in a crunch.
Right.
So ideally, you want to try to, record wave quality audio at 48K and 24-bit. That's pretty standard.
Got it. Yeah. I know that question was sort of like that's a tough thing for guys like you and I who are, who've been in the industry and have been audio professionals for years. It's like there's so many like consumer and lower quality ways to record audio on the go and video on the go and all that stuff. And it's all great. Like there's, what I mean? I'm not like bashing it at all. Like I love all that, and that's why I'm starting to stream and stuff. But like sometimes the quality of that quick and dirty video or audio is not as good. It's obviously not as good as like real serious professional audio. And so like that's why, and then maybe there's something in between, right? That's sort of like halfway in between where it's sort of easy to do into a mobile device, but it also has really good quality, right?
Yeah, well, like we talked about in the beginning, when I first started doing podcasting and I'd record interviews, I was using the Zoom H5. And then I bought some of the Behringer mics that we tested at Podcast Movement. And, I got 3. How much? It comes in a case. You get 3 for $39. What was it?
Yeah.
And they were, it's not the perfect mic, but they were good. They worked well, and then you put some low frequency roll off to help, take away some of that bouncing on the table, if people put their hands and touch the table.
Yeah.
But, sometimes it's like you got to use what you can afford. And if you're just starting out, and you need something quick and easy, I like recording to the SD card on like a Zoom. In the past, I've had my computer fill up and crash. And so it always makes me nervous, with any kind of, just because of computer, your hard drive, you use it all the time and every one of your shows is there. And that's why you got to have backups, of course. But I love recording to a device that's got a built-in SD card. So even if something crashes, you still have a backup.
Totally. All right. Well, look, I'm going to play a song that I recorded in Brooklyn when we were living together with Bryant and Matt. And I recorded the song. It's a drum machine loop guitar, and it's me playing guitar. I overdub like 5 guitars, and it's over a drum loop. And I played bass on it too. I want to play it for you and see if you recognize it.
All right.
I don't know. I don't think it's that long. Oh yeah. Give me a good oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Where's Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
There he is.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, oh yeah.
Right? Isn't this heavy?
That's dark, man.
This is some heavy stuff here. I'll fast forward to the heavy part. What? I can't fast forward? Wait a minute. I'm using Farrago, the Rogue Amoeba, the sound clip player, Farrago. I can't. I have to start. Oh, see, I ruined it. I just ruined it. I ruined it. You know what? We'll listen to this as the outro song today. How about that?
Perfect.
All right, michaelthesoundguy.com. That's your website, michaelthesoundguy.com. Your show is the Location Sound Podcast. Everyone go subscribe, do whatever, send Mike some love notes.
Appreciate it.
All that stuff. So great hanging with you on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, we'll do this again, and yeah. So, I was gonna say next time hopefully loosen up some more, because you are one of the funniest guys I know in the world, and so but like, you know, you're still like, I mean, you had your first podcast, you had like, I don't know what, 10 episodes maybe, and now this one you have 6 already, and it's like, I think when you get to like 30 and 40 and 50 episodes, like, you'll loosen up, and then then next time you come on here, we can just really have some fun and get into it a little more. But anyway, there you go. I gave you all the URLs, michaelthesoundguy.com. Check out the show notes for everything. Everything will be there, some links and stuff. So, Michael Helms, this has been awesome, brother. And check out our website, podcastengineeringschool.com. September 18th, the next semester starts, and you can get in on it. There's a special rate that's up on the website right now. Yes! This is a good one to grunt to, right, Mike?
It is.
All right, I'll let you listen to this on the way out, and we'll see you next time. And let's just yell, sound great, Mike. Ready?
All right, here we go.
Can you yell in your house?
I think I can.
All right, you don't have to yell real loud, but okay, let's do it. Sound great!